It shows Marvin Booker being grabbed by an officer, then piled on by a team of officers who then restrain him in handcuffs and put him in a chokehold. After he appears motionless, he's then tasered. Eventually, deputies carry him out of sight of the camera. Booker was pronounced dead hours later in what the coroner ruled a homicide. Prosecutors declined to charge the deputies involved, and Sheriff's Department officials never disciplined them, saying they believed Booker could harm someone and that force was needed to restrain him. On Tuesday, Booker's family and supporters gathered on the steps of Denver's City Jail after a jury awarded the Booker family $4.65 million in compensation and damages. Your response to the $4.6 million settlement that'll go to Marvin Booker's family?
Well, having spoken to the family, I think one of the things that the family wanted to be very clear about is that they're grateful that this ordeal has come to some conclusion. But they did not want and do not want those of us who live here in Denver to believe that somehow the money is a panacea for their pain. And they are very adamant about what they want from this city, and that is they want those officers removed from their positions. They've been very, very clear on that. I think the family, I spoke with Calvin, Marvin's brother, on yesterday, and one of the things that Calvin said is that he wants the community to know that their family forgives the officers. But in forgiving the officers, in no way do they want the officers not to deal with the consequences of their actions.
Mm-hmm. So how many officers were involved?
I believe there was a total of 5 officers that were involved in this case. Amy, the listeners and the viewers rather, have seen the video. This was no high-tech lynching. This was a vigilante lynching. This was a lynching in which it was sanctioned and supported by the city government. And it was sanctioned and supported all the way up until the trial. What was done to this family was unconscionable. You
wrote, Tuesday's verdict put an exclamation point on what civil rights activists and leaders of Metro Denver's African-American community long have said, that Denver killed the wrong man. Explain what you mean.
I mean that on several levels. I mean that in part because of what Pastor Holmes just said. He was a 135-pound man, a frail, homeless man who had a bad heart. So he was not much bigger than me. He posed no threat. His struggle was, as everybody can see on the video, very minimal. And at the time that he was tased, he was motionless, okay? So those facts in and of itself make him the wrong man. Another thing is, there was an assumption by Marvin Booker and a portrayal of him after his death that he was just another homeless guy who was causing trouble in the jail. And what they didn't calculate is that just homeless guy had a rich history in the South, in his hometown in Memphis, where he became really well known, not just in Memphis, but throughout the South and really the nation, for having memorized Martin Luther King's speeches. His family was close to Martin Luther King. He was 14 when Martin Luther King was shot in his community. Verbatim, he mentioned these speeches, and over time he was able to deliver them with the cadence and tone of King. And he was the guy who would go into churches and go into civil rights events and give the speeches that King wouldn't give, right? He has 2 brothers who have congregations who chose to be pastors. They followed in the footsteps of their father. He chose a different path. He wanted to preach on the street, like he said Jesus did. He wasn't a saint. He had some drug problems. The fact that he was homeless was disturbing to his family. They tried in many ways to help him, and he was really adamant that's the life he wanted to live. So when he died, again, I think, and I was here when he died, and I know what the city's response to it was, and I heard the city's response at trial, which is, this guy had no value. He was a nothing, right? And they sat in 3 weeks in trial and just denigrated him. And smeared his relationships with his family.
When did the trial take place?
It took place for 3 weeks, and it ended on Friday, and the verdict was
so it's
Tuesday.
Years later.
4 years. 4 years later. But when I say they picked the wrong man, they didn't know that this man had a community of people in this city, nationally, in the faith community, who were behind him.